Welcome to the Fusion Cell Podcast, The Military Effect. I'm your host, Jack Heath. Fusion Cell, the founding mission was and still is to this day, the mission bridging the gap between military talent and the civilian workplace.
Jack Hosterman, member of the United States Air Force, and he is Manufacturing Director of Business for Fusion Cell. Jack, thanks so much for your service and joining us on this week's Fusion Cell Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jack. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about your time in the Air Force, and thank you for your service. What made you want to join the Air Force? How many years in? And just talk a little bit about your service in the Air Force.
Absolutely. So I grew up the son of an Air Force fighter pilot and lived all over the Tactical Air Command United States, so mostly all the states south of the midline. So 14 years living on Air Force bases, and then I went through Air Force ROTC in college and joined the Air Force as a second lieutenant back in 1987. And I served as an ICBM missile launch officer. I was a combat crew commander in the Air Force's ICBM force, part of the people that pull 24 hours alert with nuclear weapons at our fingertips. Did that for a total of 4 years and briefly served as the wing commander's executive officer before leaving the Air Force to jump into my first civilian job. So 6 years of active duty service after 14 years of being the child of a military officer.
Wow, what a fascinating story of service. What's it like growing up with a dad who was a fighter pilot? That must have been some interesting times and moments.
It's a lot of fun, and actually I thought I was going to be a fighter pilot too. I actually had a pilot scholarship through Air Force ROTC, but wound up in missiles. My mom was delighted. My dad could never figure it out, and I think he's still scratching his head on that. But yeah, Dad liked fast cars and fast airplanes, and he always came home in a flight suit, and he was the kind of guy that was successful at everything he did. He was a great pilot, and 2 tours in Vietnam. Some of my earliest memories are of him being gone and then returning, and then of course he had to go again. So interesting growing up. I'm the oldest of 4 boys, and 2 of us that are closest in age, and the oldest, we both did the military. So he had a pretty big impact on my life for sure.
I love it. Thank you again for the family of service. Jack Osterman, Air Force, you're Manufacturing Director of Business for Fusion Cell. How did you join Fusion Cell? How did that come about?
Well, it's kind of a happy story, and it's not all that old at the moment. I spent the first 19 years of my life in this business working with transitioning military professionals with another company that was acquired by a bigger company that I was constructively encouraged to find new work at the beginning of this year, which is, a euphemism for a reduction in force. So I was recruited, which is kind of fun to be on the receiving end of that as a recruiter. I was contacted by a recruiter working for Fusion Cell who asked if I was interested in talking to his client. And I said, well, what do they do? And he said, well, they work with military professionals. And I said, I'm your huckleberry. I jumped in with both feet, and that was the kind of thing that I was completely unaware of because I wasn't ever looking, but turning out to be one of the best things that ever happened to me.
I want to come back to what you do specifically in the manufacturing sector and get an update on manufacturing, but it kind of cuts to the chase as the cellmate in our Fusion Cell podcast. And that is, do you believe in the mission? Do you like the team? Do you believe in the mission of Fusion Cell? And what do you think makes the sauce a little different with Fusion Cell and their expertise and understanding folks like yourself out of the military, as well as the connection to the civilian sector? Do you believe in the overall mission? Do you like the mission?
I love the mission. And honestly, Jack, this is one of those things where I'm one of those lucky people that can say that my vocation and my avocation are the same thing. I love what I do. I obviously think my father, when he retired, he struggled with marketing himself into the civilian workplace. He had this vast array of skills and was utterly unprepared to present those to companies for any of the roles that I considered him, totally qualified for. Add to that my own personal experience, 6 years of active duty. The military does a lot of great things for its top performers, but preparing them to be not in the military is not one that does well. So I love working with deserving people who share the same dedication to the country and to our values. I enjoy serving them and helping them make that transition to a deserving group, and it's a labor of love is what it is. So yeah, the Fusion Cell team, I think we all see the world through that same lens. We enjoy the people we work with and serve. They are us. Just not too long ago, And these are very rewarding success stories that we have. And our team is, maybe it's coincidence, but they are heavily Air Force, which is what I was in my previous incarnation. Most of the veterans on the team were Army and Navy, which is fine. But obviously I enjoy working with Air Force people. And our team does things a little differently than what I've done in the past. And I would argue that it does it better in many ways. So it's an easy thing to work with this crew. They're all professionals. They're all very sharp, and they all are united in a passion for serving our servicemen and women.
You know, so many skills and jobs within the Air Force or our major branches. And as you say, the military does a great job of getting someone in and training them for the people who want to be achievers. But then there's this big void and canyon, no matter how proficient and talented you were in the military, to translate those skills and what you were good at and what you enjoyed into the civilian sector. And I think that's what speaks to, you know, the whole Fusion Cell mission and you being a cellmate. Jack Hosterman, let's switch gears. Tell us a little bit about the manufacturing director of business. Kind of give us an update on manufacturing. You know, a lot of people are looking at our economy right now, trying to figure out how we end the year, how we begin next year. Tell us a little bit about manufacturing.
Absolutely. From the Fusion Cell perspective, one of the things that we know is that there's an enormous overlap of skill sets in our top performers coming out of the military that fit very well into manufacturing industry roles. They're engineering, operations, maintenance, logistics, frontline leadership, every kind of maintainer, a craftsman, technician it takes to run a world-class military has a pretty good analog in the manufacturing sector of our economy. Obviously, that's a vast playing field, but it's because of the qualifications that many of us bring out of the military for those roles that we targeted manufacturing at large. Now, we're focused at Fusion Cell on aerospace and defense, industrial products, building materials, food and beverage. These are some areas where veterans are employed in great number, and we know that there's an appreciation for not just the skill sets, but the intangibles that our top performers are bringing out of the military. The work ethic, discipline, communication skills, of course, leadership skills. So it's a target-rich environment. Phil, allow me to use military language. So manufacturing just makes a lot of sense, and we place a lot of people into roles up and down the management and the craftsman technician ranks there. Now, as far as where manufacturing is going, that is obviously the $20,000 question. There are a number of themes that we're seeing. Some are old themes that are not going away, like the shortage of craftsmen and technician just nationwide. If you go to one of these job opening aggregators and punch in the word technician, there's over 500,000 unfilled roles nationwide looking for technicians and craftsmen. Of course, the military produces those in great number and with great skill sets. So that's one channel. There are 1.2 million unfilled supervisor roles nationwide. Again, leadership is in high demand. It's always in demand. So some of these things are typical. Manufacturing is constantly trying to pour new talent into the leadership bench funnel and to solve immediate problems. And that's one of the reasons why we enjoy success in manufacturing. Now, one of the new things that we're trying to see through the crystal ball and see what is the new normal is literally the loss of workforce in the wake of COVID. Depending upon who you believe, there are 900,000 fewer people in the workforce, approximately 1%, than pre-COVID. And so companies are having to figure out how to have people do more things, the critical things that you might have thrown more numbers at previously, and those numbers just don't exist right now. So the demand is constant, the supply is relatively limited, and the professional military veteran fits into that. It's a nice opportunity for us. In general, though, the constantly accelerating pace of technology is causing a continual gap in the supply of technically capable people. Military fills that greatly because we're charged with staying on top of every advance on every field in technology in order to defend the country. And so technology is accelerating. People have to be able to do more things and different things quickly. So that's one of the themes. And I guess last but not least is because of the critical role that more people are playing in those companies, the cost of losing employees and bad hiring is rising maybe even faster. So it's valuable to have sticky people who own the mission, make rapid and accurate decisions, and stay till the work is done.
Great update on manufacturing in general in the United States. Jack, you talked about the lack of available, talented, skilled workers and how many are coming out of the military each year. But you take states, for example, in New England, some of the unemployment rates in a state like New Hampshire, where Fusion Cell's headquarters, less than 2%. I think the last unemployment rate was 1.7%. Just not enough skilled workers out there. So if Fusion Cell can find skilled workers out of the military for the manufacturing sector with technology and everything from hospitality and beverage to technology to space exploration, that's great. Talk about the AUSA 2023. What's that all about?
AUSA is the annual meeting of the United States Army. It takes place in Washington, D.C. every year, and it's basically a week-long event, but it's attended by close to 1,000 exhibitors and 30,000 guests, both American and international. It's all of the vendors and the manufacturers that serve the United States Army. We literally have just returned from that, and we had a team there both from my division and from the government contracting division. Obviously, those companies are leaning into serving the military, and they see a lot of value not only in the skill sets we can bring them for their own teams, but having subject matter experts who have literally used their products or employed their products in the field. We spent a lot of time introducing ourselves to some of the decision makers at these companies and making them aware of us as a resource for building their bench and acquiring the kind of talent that will help them grow their business, particularly in light of what the U.S. Army is doing. But I think we all put about 21 or 22,000 steps on our shoes for 3 days in a row in one of the big exhibit halls in Washington, D.C. It was a great success.
How was the team and the approach received by some of these decision makers?
It went really well. Everybody recognized the value of what we were proposing to them. And so in many cases, what we were given is a promise to connect us to the decision makers back at corporate, put us in contact with talent acquisition or the hiring managers for the kind of roles that we place people in. In some cases, we ran into the actual hiring managers there, and they said, call me. I have these openings on my team and these openings around our manufacturing footprint around the country. And so we're following up those literally right now. I was doing that before I got on the call with you.
Sounds great.
So, yeah, we were well received, and our government contracting division is doing quite well.
Jack Hosterman, United States Air Force, Fusion Cell Cellmate, being featured in our podcast. Before I let you go, Jack, any recent success stories beyond the recent Army show, if you will?
It's kind of a fun story because most of the time we don't meet our clients face-to-face. We do our work over the phone or by email. But at the MROA conference in Atlanta, it's the aerospace convention. We were doing the same work where we introduced ourselves, and I got a job order literally standing at the booth from one of the hiring managers who said he had a acute need for a field service engineer with an airframe and power plant license. And it'd been open for about 6 months, and he couldn't stand it anymore. He connected me to talent acquisition, and we talked shop. We got 2 candidates to him within a couple of weeks, and he hired him within a month. So it's kind of a fun story where it happened on the exhibit hall floor. Pretty cool.
That's awesome. Well, Jack Hosterman, great family of service and a story of your family, your dad being a fighter pilot, and your time in the Air Force with the ICBMs, and talk about discipline and expertise. Thank you so much. A great cellmate, great story on the manufacturing side. Until next time, I'm Jack Heath with your Fusion Cell Cellmate stories. Stay tuned and see what makes Fusion Cell different each and every week. Thanks a lot for joining us.